Welcome to FolkFear, where forgotten traditions aren't just tales, they're warnings. Tonight, we return to the mountains, where grief is not buried, but carved into wood and left rocking in the cold wind. In this village, when a baby dies before its name is spoken, its soul doesn't leave. It lingers, hollow, hungry, and waiting to be held again. They say there's a ritual, a cradle filled with milk, soil, and a mother's hair. It's meant to fool the dead into resting. But what happens when a mother refuses to let go? This is the story of the Hollow Cradle, where lullabies raise more than ghosts, and love becomes the most dangerous thing of all. It should have been a cry, a scream piercing the misty dawn, echoing through the valley like every newborn before him. The kind of sound that makes a mother weep in relief, a midwife smile in exhaustion, and a father drop to his knees with thanks. But there was no cry, only silence, thick and unnatural, pressing against the wooden walls of the birthing hut like something alive. The only sound was the wind weaving through the highland trees, tugging at the bamboo slats with impatient fingers. Outside, the roosters had gone quiet. Even the dogs didn't bark. Inside, the baby was still, too still. His skin was pale, not cold, but not warm either. Lips slightly parted, as if unsure whether to breathe. His fingers curled gently around nothing, around air that would never be his to grasp. Mai didn't scream. She simply stared at him, her chest rising and falling, as if trying to convince him to do the same. Her arms were already open, waiting. Her song had been waiting too, tucked somewhere in her throat, ready to welcome him. But the song never came. The midwife backed away first, whispering a prayer under her breath, making the sign of forgetting, an ancient gesture that meant this child never lived and therefore cannot be mourned. No name, she muttered. No spirit to anchor. Mai flinched. No name yet, she whispered, but he's mine. He'll have one. Her hands reached out, trembling, but the midwife caught her wrist, gently, firmly. You mustn't touch him. Not now. Not while he's hollow. Mai blinked. Hollow? The midwife didn't answer. She turned away and opened the door, letting the morning fog curl into the room like a waiting ghost. Outside, the villagers had already begun preparing the ritual. A cradle of old wood was being carved, not to hold a living child, but to deceive a dead one. Milk was poured, soil scooped from the base of the family tree. A single lock of Mai's hair, cut without her consent, was already resting in the hollow where the child should have slept. This was cradling the hollow, a rite performed in silence. No one told Mai how it worked. No one explained what the milk was for. All she knew was that they wouldn't let her hold her son, but they would leave a wooden shell for his soul to crawl into. And something about that made her chest burn. As the villagers bowed their heads and turned their backs, Mai stood at the door of her home, barefoot, bleeding slightly, and watched as they placed the cradle just outside. A vessel of mourning, a trick for the spirit. But to Mai, it looked like a promise. A promise that if she waited long enough, he would come back. The cradle was older than memory. No one in the village remembered who carved the first one. The wood came from the twisted fig trees that grew only near the cliff's edge, where the wind howled like something mourning. It wasn't sanded smooth. It wasn't meant for comfort. It was meant for deception. Mai stood on the threshold, her bare feet numb against the cold wooden planks. Her eyes never left the cradle, resting just outside her door, cradled by fog like a ghostly offering left for something inhuman. It looked so small, yet the way the villagers treated it, with reverence, with fear, it felt as if they believed something already lived inside. A woman named Ba Lian, the eldest matron, bent over the cradle with shaking hands. She poured in the milk, thick, warm, fresh from the village cow. It filled the basin with a pale shimmer, like moonlight trapped in wood. Next came the soil, dark, damp, rich with worms and memory. Taken from beneath Mai's family tree, the tree where names were carved for every child born and every elder buried. She watched as the clumps fell into the milk, swirling into strange patterns, like veins, like roots. Then, the hair, her own. A single lock, stolen while she slept after the stillbirth, cut by the midwife's knife without asking. The strands floated atop the mixture, black against white, like a shadow trying to stay afloat. Ba Lian whispered, "Let this be his vessel. Let this be his body. Let him think he is loved, so he may sleep." The words chilled Mai. Loved? He was loved. He is loved. Why speak of it like a lie? That night, the cradle stayed outside, as the custom demanded. No one touched it. No one looked at it after sunset. Doors were bolted, windows shuttered. Even the dogs were locked in, tails between their legs. But Mai didn't sleep. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, her hands on her stomach where life had once moved. Her breasts ached, still full of milk with nowhere to go. Her ears rang with silence. Then, a creak. Soft, gentle, rhythmic. The kind of sound only a mother would recognize. Rocking. The cradle was rocking. She rose slowly, not out of fear, but instinct. She didn't grab a lantern. She didn't call anyone. She simply opened the door. There it was. Still there. The cradle swayed gently, as if pushed by an unseen hand or a pair of very small feet. The milk had stilled. The soil was unmoving. But Mai thought she saw something else. A dent right at the center of the cradle, as if a weight had settled there, as if something had lain down. She didn't go back to bed. She sat by the door, cross-legged, staring at the cradle, humming a lullaby that had no name, only rhythm. A tune her own mother once sang, a tune older than grief. And in that moment, beneath the cold moon and the wooden beams above her head, she made a decision. If her child had no body, she would make one out of song. If her child had no name, she would call him in her dreams. If her child had no breath, she would rock the hollow until he learned to breathe again. By the third morning, something had changed. Mai opened the door at dawn, expecting stillness, expecting ritual. But the cradle looked different. Not broken, not disturbed, just wrong. The milk was no longer white. It had curdled into a pale gray jelly, like it had aged decades in a single night. A foul smell clung to it, sharp and sour, like spoiled breath. Flies should have come, but none did. Even the insects avoided the cradle now. The soil had shifted too. What was once rich and black had turned dry and ashen, cracked like old skin. It had hardened into strange ridges, like something had crawled through it, something with very small fingers, tiny gouges, uneven furrows, traces of motion. Mai leaned closer and saw something that made her blood turn to ice. Her hair, the lock that had been placed gently on top, was no longer floating. It was braided, tightly, precisely, as if done by an unseen hand, as if someone had sat beside the cradle in the night and twisted each strand with quiet, meticulous care. She reached out to touch it, but the moment her fingers hovered above the cradle, she felt it. Not heat, not cold. Weight. A heaviness in the air, like breath held too long, like something ancient had opened its eyes beneath the wood. The cradle didn't move, but it watched. That night, she brought a warm bowl of milk from her own kitchen, not part of the ritual, not sanctioned by the elders, just mother's milk, fresh, full, meant for a mouth that never learned to suckle. She placed it beside the cradle and whispered softly, "For you, so you don't go hungry." She wasn't sure why she said it aloud, but it felt right. Then she sat down and began to hum again. Same lullaby, same rhythm, but this time she swore. Something hummed back. Very faint, like a breath caught in wood grain, like wind mimicking melody. She didn't stop. She rocked the cradle with the bare tips of her fingers, just once. It didn't creak. It responded. It swayed and stayed in motion, even after she pulled her hand away. At dawn, the milk was gone. Not spilled, not tipped. Gone. The bowl was clean, dry, as if licked. The soil had rearranged itself into a swirl, a spiral, like something had nested in it. The braid of hair had been pulled apart, and a few strands were now embedded in the grain of the wood. She should have felt horror, but instead, Mai wept, because something, whatever it was, had accepted her gift. And in that twisted ritual of milk, soil, and hair, she felt something no one else in the village believed possible. Her child was coming home. It began with the smoke. Not fire, not incense, just a curl of pale mist rising from the cradle one cold dawn, though no heat had touched it. Mai had just finished her lullaby. She sat cross-legged at the doorway, fingers resting on her knees, breath visible in the morning chill. The cradle rocked slowly, not by her hand, not by the wind, but by some inner rhythm. And the smoke lifted, thin as spider silk, soft as breath. It rose in spirals, forming no clear shape. But as the wind caught it, she saw something, a momentary image, a silhouette, a baby, not fully formed, not flesh, just the ghost of an outline, round head, curled arms, knees tucked close. It hovered above the cradle for a breath, maybe two, then dissolved. Mai didn't scream. She smiled. Because for the first time in days, she saw him. Not a memory, not a grave, but a shape, a presence, a child trying to be real again. That night, She sang longer than usual. Hours passed. The sky turned dark. The lantern beside her flickered low. And then she heard it. A second voice, faint, fragile, echoing her lullaby, but missing notes like someone learning. Mai froze. The sound wasn't coming from her lips, nor from the wind. It came from inside the cradle. She leaned closer, heart pounding. The melody repeated, wavering, off-key, like a child humming with no words, no memory, just imitation, just longing. She pressed her forehead to the side of the cradle. Tears slipped down her cheek. I hear you. I'm here. That night, she dreamed of fog, thick and silvery, curling through her house like fingers brushing memory. In the dream, she wandered barefoot, cradling something warm to her chest. But every time she looked down, her arms were empty. She wasn't afraid. She followed the fog through the hallway, past the kitchen, to the door. The cradle was inside now, rocking, full. She stepped forward and saw him. Eyes closed, skin pale but glowing, tiny chest rising and falling gently. He had no name, no voice, but he was there. She reached out, touched his cheek, and it felt real, warm, wet, like breath on skin. He opened his mouth, not to cry, but to sing. A note spilled from his lips like mist, and the song was hers. Mai woke in tears. The air in the room smelled faintly of milk and old wood. And on the floor, leading from the door to her bedside, were small wet footprints, child-sized, trailing mud and something darker. The knock came just after sunrise, sharp, fast, uneasy. Mai opened the door and found her sister, Ling, standing on the steps with her shawl drawn tight and a face full of storm. Without asking, Ling stepped inside. She didn't greet the cradle. She didn't look at it. She moved past it the way one walks past a grave they do not wish to disturb. "You've been feeding it," Ling said. "Haven't you?" Mai didn't answer. Her eyes drifted to the empty bowl beside the cradle, still warmed from last night's milk. The soil had shifted again, this time into a shallow dip, as if a small body had settled into sleep. Ling followed her gaze and clenched her jaw. "This isn't mourning anymore, Mai. It's inviting." Mai sat down slowly, as if lowering herself into a memory too deep. "He comes to me," she whispered, "in dreams, in song. He's not angry, he's not lost, he's just waiting." Ling knelt in front of her, voice low and urgent. "He's not your son anymore. You don't know that. No, you don't. You don't know what answers when you keep calling, what wears his shape, what mimics your lullaby." Mai shook her head. "I held him in that dream, Ling. I felt his breath, his warmth. Dreams lie, grief lies, but the The hollow never lies. Ling stood up abruptly, her hands trembling. She walked toward the cradle, reaching for it. This needs to stop. But the moment her fingers brushed the wood, she recoiled. Her skin blistered where it touched. Red welts rose in the shape of tiny handprints. She staggered back, breathing hard, staring at her hand in horror. "It touched me," she said. "He's protecting himself," Mai said. "That's not protection, that's a warning." Ling turned back to her sister with eyes wide and glistening. "Do you know why we cradle the hollow, Mai? It's not to bring them peace, it's to keep us safe." She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper now. "If a child dies before they are named, they can't cross over. And if a mother won't let go, won't stop calling, they come back, wrong." Mai looked down at the cradle, which now swayed gently as if in rhythm with their conversation. Ling continued, "They come back not as spirits, but as imitations. Hunger wearing a baby smile, emptiness that wants to be whole and will take whatever it needs to become real." Mai's voice broke. "Then let him take it. Take the name, take the breath, take everything. I'd rather have a shadow than silence." Ling stepped back, heartbroken. "Don't wake the hollow, Mai. Don't give it shape, or you'll never know where he ends and the thing begins." Outside, the wind had stopped. The cradle rocked once, twice, then stilled. From within it, a low gurgling noise rose, wet, muffled, like a child learning to breathe through soil. It was still dark when Mai woke. Not from a nightmare, not from grief, from a sound. Tap, tap, tap. She sat up slowly, her breath clouding in the cold air. The fire in the hearth had long gone out, and the room felt soaked in chill, like the damp of something buried too shallow. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the window. She rose, barefoot on the creaking floor, drawn toward the sound with the heavy stillness of sleep not fully shaken off. As she neared the glass, the tapping stopped, and something else appeared. Fingerprints, small, sticky, smeared across the inside of the window. Not outside, inside. 5 of them, spaced wide like the spread of a tiny hand. She reached out hesitantly and placed her palm beside the prints. They matched, not in size, but in shape. A child's hand, just like she remembered, just like his. She didn't scream. Instead, she whispered through the glass, "Are you cold? Do you want to come in?" The prints slowly faded before her eyes, as if wiped from the inside. But no one else was there. The next morning, she found muddy footprints on the floor again, trailing from the front door to the cradle, then from the cradle to her bed. And at the edge of her blanket, resting like a keepsake, was one of her old nursing cloths, folded, damp, and chewed. She brought more milk that night, warmer than ever. She placed it beside the cradle without a word. No lullaby, no humming. She didn't need to sing anymore. The house sang for her now. Floorboards creaked in rhythm. Walls exhaled soft breaths. Windows fogged without wind. There was a rhythm to it all, like a sleeping body inhaling, exhaling, dreaming. And in that rhythm, Mai began to feel something new. Not grief, not joy, obedience. Around midnight, the window fogged again. This time, she didn't look away. She watched as a single word was drawn into the condensation from the inside. Mama. She dropped the bowl. Milk splashed across the floorboards like spilled moonlight. The cradle rocked once, then stopped. And the air grew heavy, like the breath of something that had never truly learned how to live, now learning how to stay. By the 7th day, the soil was no longer just soil. It pulsed, not visibly, not violently, but when Mai leaned close, she could feel it breathing. Each morning, the texture changed. Once loose and dry, it had turned dark and spongy, like wet moss left too long in shade. There were veins of pale root curling through it now, though no one had planted anything. She reached in, fingertips barely brushing the surface. It was warm, too warm, not like sun-warmed earth, but like skin, flesh beneath flesh. She pulled her hand back and found a single black thread tangled around her finger, a strand of hair, not hers. She began to dream differently, no longer of fog or lullabies, but of digging. She saw herself clawing into soft earth, not with a shovel, but with bare hands, fingers bleeding, nails torn. She dug deeper and deeper into a grave that never ended. And at the bottom, there was no coffin, only a cradle, filled with dirt. And in that dirt, a baby, gurgling, smiling, its mouth full of mud, its eyes hollow but open. When she reached out to lift it, the soil reached back. She woke screaming, sweat-drenched, nails blackened with soil she couldn't explain. She stumbled to the cradle, desperate, breath hitching, and gasped. Tiny footprints in the soil, pressing down from above, like something had walked in place, like something had been learning how to stand. 5 toes, deep impressions, and drag marks behind them, where knees had shifted, where elbows had pushed upward, like a baby practicing movement inside a womb made of milk and earth. She fell to her knees. "You're growing," she whispered. "You're becoming real." Later that day, she noticed something else. Teeth marks along the edge of the wooden cradle. Small, repetitive, shallow at first, then deeper, sharper, stronger. As if gums had hardened, as if teething had begun. And then the smell. Not rot, not mold. Something more organic, something like birth. The scent of placenta and old blood, of something pushing into the world from underneath it. That night she found her hand resting on the soil as she slept beside the cradle. Not above it, in it. Buried up to the wrist, soil packed gently around her skin. And she didn't pull away, because for the first time it felt right. Warm, familiar, like holding her child's hand, even if it was cold on the other side. The lullaby came from the far end of the house, faint, wavering, almost too soft to hear, but unmistakably familiar. Mai froze mid-step, the wooden bowl of milk in her hands trembling. She turned her head slowly toward the hallway, heart hammering against her ribs. "Sleep now, my little one, hush now, no fear." The words were hers, but the voice wasn't. It was wrong, not just off-pitch, but slower, dragged, like someone was mimicking her song syllable by syllable, but without understanding the meaning. A poor copy, a child's copy, or something worse. She stepped forward, the bowl forgotten on the floor. The voice continued, echoing from the shadows. Close your eye, lay down dirt near. It wasn't singing anymore. It was assembling words, testing them, shaping them the way clay mimics flesh. She reached the doorway to her bedroom and saw nothing. Only the window, fogged again. Only the cradle, still and quiet. Only the soil, recently disturbed. And yet the song continued. Now from behind her, she spun. The hallway behind her was empty, but the voice now echoed from every corner of the house, low, whispered, like breath through splinters. Then it stopped. All at once. The silence that followed was heavier than the sound. And then the cry. Soft, gurgling, like a baby's cry, but filtered through wet earth, like lungs struggling through mud, like something trying to remember how crying used to sound. Mai dropped to her knees beside the cradle, frantic. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm here." But the cradle didn't rock. Instead, the soil inside shifted, not settled, not caving. It rose, slowly, swelling upward as if something beneath it had pressed against the surface, like a child kicking from inside the womb. Then the hair appeared again, strands curled in the dirt, arranged in a spiral, spelling out a single word in crude shape. Ma. That night, she didn't sleep in her bed. She lay beside the cradle, her hand resting gently on the soil, not to comfort it, not to feed it, but to listen. And as the house creaked and the wind fell still, she heard it once more. Sleep now, hush now, down, down. The song, her song, but no longer hers, sung now from inside the cradle, with a mouth that never learned to speak and was still full of dirt. At first, Mai thought the bowl had been left out too long. The milk she had placed beside the cradle the night before was no longer liquid. It had clotted, not like spoiled milk left in the sun. This was thicker, gelatinous, opaque, yellow-gray with dark threads curling inside like veins. The scent rising from it wasn't sour. It was sweet, sickly rotting, almost floral. She gagged. Even flies avoided it. She poured it out behind the house, but the ground refused to drink it. The grass beneath withered by noon. That night, she brought fresh milk again, boiled it, blessed it, whispered her lullaby into it. She placed the warm bowl beside the cradle with trembling hands. "Drink gently," she whispered. "Mama made it warm tonight." She didn't sing this time. She only watched. The cradle rocked once, then stilled, and the milk steamed. A slow, unnatural fog rose from the surface, curling toward the soil in the crib. By dawn, the bowl was empty again, but the smell had worsened, and the wood of the cradle where the bowl had rested was now splintering, warped like it had absorbed something caustic. The following morning, Mai awoke to a low buzzing sound. She followed it to the kitchen and found a line of ants marching in reverse from the bowl toward the cradle. Not one carried food. They marched as if drawn, controlled. At the end of the trail, the bowl was full again, not of milk, but of hair. Curled, wet, coated in film. Some strands were hers, some were not. Lynn came again that afternoon. She didn't speak when she entered. Her eyes scanned the house like a soldier surveying a battlefield. Then she looked at Mai. "Your skin," she said. Mai blinked. "What?" Lynn stepped closer, frowning. "Your hands, they smell like iron." Mai lifted her palms. The creases were dark, not with soil, not with milk, but something in between, like dried sap mixed with blood. And underneath her nails, fibers. "Have you been feeding it again?" Lynn asked, voice low. Mai didn't answer. Lynn walked to the cradle. The soil was bubbling gently, not violently, just enough to move. And the sour, sweet scent of rotting milk filled the air like incense. "It's feeding on you now," Lynn whispered. "You're not the mother, you're the womb." That night, Mai didn't bring milk. She brought herself. She lay beside the cradle, pressed her lips to the soil and whispered, "You don't need food, you don't need sleep, you just need me." And from inside the crib, something sighed. A wet, contented sound, almost purring. By morning, the bowl was filled again, this time with teeth. Tiny, milk white, too many for one baby. Some were flat, some were sharp, and the bowl was warm, like breath had been on it all night. Lynn came at dusk. She didn't knock. She didn't speak. She carried a clay jar of oil in one hand and a bundle of dried branches in the other. Her face was pale, her eyes set in stone. Mai stood in the doorway, blocking the cradle behind her. "Move," Lynn said. Mai didn't. "You'll kill him," she whispered. Lynn stepped forward. "He's already dead." "He's coming back." "Then let him stay where he belongs." With one quick motion, Lynn shoved past her. The cradle stood still, half swallowed by shadow. The soil inside was now damp and glistening, glimmering with soft movement. Lynn didn't hesitate. She poured the oil across the wood, letting it soak deep into the grain. The cradle hissed, not from fire, but as if breathing, resisting the touch. Then she struck the match. "I'm sorry, Mai," she said. "You should have let him go." The fire caught fast. The old wood drank the flame, leaping upward like a hungry tongue. The soil steamed. A sour smell filled the air, milk and blood and something more ancient. Then the cradle screamed. It wasn't wood cracking. It wasn't the fire's roar. It was a high, wet wail, like a baby choking underwater. Mai dropped to her knees, covering her ears. "Stop," she sobbed. "You're hurting him." But Lynn stood firm, watching the flames rise, jaw clenched tight. Until something changed. The fire dimmed. The wailing stopped. And from the burning soil, something sat up. A silhouette. Small. Blackened. Its skin made of ash and dirt and threads of hair. It turned toward Lynn, though it had no eyes, and smiled. Lynn dropped the torch. She backed away, tripping over the threshold of the house. "No," she whispered. "No." She turned and fled into the night. They found her the next morning, face down, in the pond behind the house. But she hadn't drowned in water. She had drowned in milk. The liquid was thick and white, coating her hair, her clothes, her lungs, and in her mouth, a single baby tooth. Mai didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stood at the edge of the pond, arms folded across her chest, eyes calm. "She wasn't the mother," she said softly. "She didn't understand." She turned back toward the house, and from the shadows inside, the cradle rocked, slowly, rhythmically. And from the soil, a gurgle of laughter rose, not from joy, but from something that had won. In the days that followed Lynn's death, the house grew quieter, but not in peace. The silence inside was dense, alive, like breath held too long. The floorboards no longer creaked, the walls no longer sighed. Even the wind outside seemed to stop at the door, unwilling to cross the threshold. The cradle, though blackened and half-charred, remained, still full, still warm, still growing. Mai sat by the hearth, holding a tattered old scroll in her lap. It had been tucked inside a chest Lynn left behind, something from their grandmother, a collection of faded Village customs written in careful ink strokes. Most were unreadable, but one page was still clear. At the top, the naming of the breathless. She read aloud in a whisper. "A child who dies before their name is spoken does not cross the veil. It remains near, hollow, anchorless. If no name was given, no soul was sealed. It is not dead. It is not alive. It is returning." Her eyes widened as she traced the rest with trembling fingers. To name such a spirit after death is to feed it, to shape its hollowness, to give it desire, purpose, and form. But beware, the name you give, it will wear. Mai dropped the scroll. She backed away from it like it had burned her. But in her chest, something stirred. She thought of the foggy windows, the words spelled in breath, Mama, the teeth, the footprints, the gurgled lullabies. He was asking for a name. He was waiting, not to be reborn, but to be made. That night, the cradle rocked again, more rhythmic now, confident, like a child had learned how to move. Mai knelt beside it, tears streaking her cheeks. "I should have named you. I should have held you before they took you." The soil shifted. It rose just slightly, forming a shape, a round mound, a head. And from within, a faint sound, It wasn't just mimicking anymore. It was trying to speak, trying to be. She knew what the old scroll warned. She knew that to give it a name now would be to finish what death had interrupted, to call it back not as her child, but as something else. But she didn't care. Love, once broken, doesn't reason. It begs. It builds gods from grief. She placed her hand gently over the mound in the soil and whispered, "Your name is Tam." A pause, a shift, and then heat. The soil pulsed beneath her fingers, sudden and sharp, like a heartbeat or a contraction. And from the depths of the cradle, a voice, not echo, not mimicry, but voice, rose into the air. Mom, Tom." The fire in the hearth died out. The air turned cold, and in the shadows behind Mai, something stood up. Small, barefoot, dripping soil, and smiling. It began with a creak. Soft, measured, just after midnight. Mai opened her eyes. She hadn't been asleep. Not truly. She rarely did anymore. The room was dark. The fire had long gone cold. But something moved. Not in the cradle, under it. The creaking continued. Wood straining under weight, too light for an adult, too heavy for a rat. Then a pause, and a sound like breath, not her own, slow and wet, pressed against the underside of the floor. Mai sat up, her hand pressed to the ground. It was warmer than the air, too warm. She leaned close. Her ear touched the wood, and from beneath she heard, "Ma, Ma, Ma." 3 syllables whispered through timber, like fog caught between cracks. The next night, the sounds changed. Not whispers, footsteps, tiny ones, padded, curious, wandering beneath her. They traveled the length of the hallway, circling rooms, then stopped just beneath her bed and stayed. She lay still, heart pounding. The wood beneath her mattress gently rose and fell, as if the house itself was breathing. And sometimes, just before sleep took her, she swore she heard giggles. During the day, nothing happened. The cradle remained still, but the floor told a different story. Dark smudges began appearing, small ovals like heel prints, dirty imprints under furniture, mud tracks that disappeared before the front door, and under the floorboards, scratches. Tiny at first, then deeper, as if something with small, determined hands was digging upward, trying to surface. On the 4th night, Mai couldn't take it. She tore up one of the boards in the hallway. Underneath, damp earth, but also something else. Fingernail marks. Dozens, maybe hundreds, etched into the underside of the wood, as if something had been crawling beneath the house for days. No tunnels, no creature, just claw marks. And in the very center, a single baby tooth. That night, she locked the doors, barred the windows, sat beside the cradle with a knife in her lap. "If you need to come out, then do it in the open," she whispered into the shadows. The floor was silent. The cradle didn't move. But the ceiling groaned. And from above, she heard tiny footsteps walking on the roof. The next morning, the villagers heard what sounded like a child running laps around the house at dawn. But no footprints were ever found. Only the wooden floor, split slightly down the middle, as if something beneath had finally started to push through. The first time it cried, it was almost human. The sound drifted from the cradle just past midnight, thin, muffled, and slow, like lungs learning how to inflate. Not sharp, not angry, just lonely. Mai was humming, half asleep by the fire, her voice cracked from hours of singing. When she paused to sip water, the cry began. Soft, then louder, then sharp, desperate. Her, her, her. A wet sound followed, like coughing through mud, then the thump of small fists pounding against the inside of the crib. She dropped the cup. I'm here, she whispered, crawling to the cradle. She resumed the song. Within seconds, the crying stopped. The house fell silent. The next night, it happened again. She paused to relight a candle, and behind her, the cry started low, then spiraled upward, wailing from the pit of the wooden crib. The flame flickered wildly. She turned, heart pounding, and began to sing before she even reached the cradle. Once more, the crying stopped. But this time, something else happened. The soil shifted, lifting into a mound, and something beneath it sighed. Not like a baby, like something resting. By the third night, the rule was clear. If she stopped, it screamed. If she sang, it slept. And if she tried to leave the room for even a minute, the floorboards would shake, the windows would rattle, and the sound, that inhuman sobbing, would fill every corner of the house. She no longer ate. She no longer bathed. She sat beside the cradle day and night, voice hoarse, throat raw. Sometimes she didn't even sing actual songs anymore, just sound, just noise, to keep it calm, to keep it fed. One night, she fell asleep mid-hum, only for a moment. She woke to find the cradle on its side, the soil spilled onto the floor. In the center of the mess, 2 handprints, pressed into the dirt, pushing upward like something had tried to crawl out. A trail of mud led from the spill to her bed, and on the edge of the mattress, where her pillow lay, were 5 tiny, dark finger marks. She dragged the cradle back, filled it with soil again, and resumed singing. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice did not falter. Hush now, my little one, sleep in the ground. Don't cry, please, don't cry. The window stopped shaking, the floor grew still, and from inside the cradle, something purred. Not like a baby, but like something content after feeding. By dawn, her voice was gone, but the humming didn't stop, because now the cradle hummed back. She came at dusk. No one had seen the village midwife since the night of the birth. Some said she'd fled the mountains. Others said she'd gone mad, whispering to rivers and burning herbs in circles no one dared cross. But that evening, as the last light died behind the hills, she knocked on Mai's door. 3 soft taps and silence. Mai opened it, her body frail, her lips cracked from sleepless nights of singing. She didn't speak. She just stepped aside. The midwife entered slowly, eyes scanning the room like one returning to a place where something had gone wrong. She stopped in front of the cradle. It rocked once. No wind, just motion. The midwife bowed her head. "You fed it," she said. "You named it." Mai's voice was barely a whisper. "He's mine." "He was never meant to be yours." The midwife sat by the hearth, pulling a faded cloth from her pocket. Inside it, wrapped like relics, were fragments of teeth, a tuft of white hair, and a tiny wooden figure, shaped like a baby, but faceless. "He was the third," she said. Mai frowned. "What?" "There have been others," the midwife continued. "In every generation there is a hollow, a child that doesn't cry, a body that doesn't breathe, but still waits." She looked at Mai then, eyes rimmed with something between guilt and terror. "They come from places no prayer can reach. They are not born, they are invited." Mai gripped the edge of the cradle. "I didn't invite him." "You mourned too loud, you loved too hard, you sang through the veil, and something listened." "He's not a monster." The midwife's hands trembled. "No, not yet, but he will be, because that's what they do, Mai. They learn, they mimic, they wait for a name to make them real." She pointed to the soil. "That cradle was never a gift. It was a cage. The milk, the soil, the hair, those were bindings, not offerings, not love, locks. And you've been unlocking them every night, with every lullaby, with every bowl, with every name." The cradle rocked harder now. The soil inside trembled, then split down the middle. A crack formed, deep, wet, and from within a breath escaped. "Ma!" The midwife stood. "It's no longer yours. It's almost done. And when it is, it won't need your voice anymore. It will find its own." She walked to the door, but paused before stepping out. "You think this is love, Mai, but this is birth, and you're the one giving it life." Then she was gone. That night, Mai tried not to sing. She tried to stay silent, to resist, to reclaim what was left of her voice, her mind, her soul. But before midnight, the walls began to bleed. Milk, thick, warm, oozing from every crack, every joint in the wood. And beneath the floorboards, a heartbeat began. Not hers, not human, but steady, strong. The first time she saw it was by accident. Mai had drifted into sleep beside the cradle, her back aching, her throat raw. Her lullaby had trailed off into silence. For the first time in days, she had let her body go limp, just for a moment. That moment was enough. She woke to silence, too silent. No rocking, no breathing, no purring from the soil, just stillness. Then a soft rustle. She opened her eyes and saw him, standing, not in the cradle, but beside it. He was small, bare, covered in clinging wet earth. A tangle of hair and soil stuck to his limbs like afterbirth. His chest rose and fell with jerky rhythm, like lungs not yet used to air. And his face, oh God, his face. Where his eyes should have been, there were only smooth hollows. Not empty sockets, no blood, just skin. Skin stretched perfectly over where eyes should exist, like they had never been there at all. And yet, he was looking at her. She felt it. The gaze, the awareness, the weight of it. Not through sight, but through something deeper, hungrier. He smiled. His teeth were small, not baby teeth, not adult. Something in between. Too many, too sharp, and between them bits of soil clung to his gums, wet and dark, like he had been feeding. Mai tried to speak, but her throat clenched. Her body didn't move. Every limb screamed to run, but her heart whispered, "Stay. He's yours. He's still yours." He reached for her, a tiny, filthy hand. His fingers left streaks of mud on the floor, the walls, the edge of her skirt. He touched her face, and she felt it. Cold, deep, eternal, like grave dirt pressed against skin. He leaned forward. His forehead touched hers, and in the darkness behind his eyeless face, she saw everything. The hunger, not for food, not for love, for form, for shape, for self, for existence. She had given him a name. Now he wanted a body. And he was building it from whatever he could. Her milk, her voice, her blood, her breath, her grief. He opened his mouth. No sound came, only soil. A thick clump dropped to the floor with a soft thud. He smiled again, then turned and crawled back into the cradle, pulled the soil up over his chest like a blanket, closed his mouth, and went still. Mai sat in the silence, rocking slightly, tears running down her cheeks. He's real now. He's almost here. And from within the cradle, the floorboards pulsed as if something beneath the house had begun to breathe with him. The scroll was hidden beneath a loose floorboard in Lynn's old room. Mai found it by accident, though deep down, something in her already knew it was waiting for her. The parchment crackled like dead leaves in her hands. The ink had bled from time and moisture, but one line remained untouched, as if protected. What love remembers, this ritual makes forget. It was called the ritual of forgetting. Not a blessing, not a burial rite, but an erasure. A final act reserved for those who'd called back something they shouldn't have. Mai read the steps by candlelight, trembling. They were cruel. Each part demanded sacrifice, not of blood, but of memory. Step 1, burn the lullaby. Write it down, every word, every note, then set it aflame so the spirit no longer knows its song. Mai sat at her table. Her hand shook as she scribbled the melody she had sung for nights, her mother's song, her grandmother's whisper, the only cradle hymn she knew. She watched it curl in flame. A scream echoed from the cradle as the smoke rose. The floor trembled, the window cracked, but she did not stop. Step 2, break the cradle, split the wood, scatter the soil, undo the vessel the spirit sleeps in. She waited until dawn, then with numb hands lifted the cradle and carried it out into the field behind the house. Every step felt like carrying a coffin, but not his, her own. She set it down, picked up the axe Lynn had left behind, and raised it. The soil shifted inside. Ma. A gurgle, a plea, a choking sound that sounded almost sad. She brought the axe down, once, twice. The cradle shattered, the soil spilled like blood, and from the center of the ruin, nothing. No body, no scream, just silence. Step 3. Sever the name. Speak it backward at sunset. Bury the sound in running water. At twilight, Mai stood at the stream with the name Tom on her tongue. Her lips quivered. He'll be lost. He'll forget me. He'll think I never loved him. She almost turned back, almost, but then she saw her reflection in the stream. Eyes hollow, skin gray, lips cracked like the soil of the cradle. Not a mother, a vessel, a cage, a doorway. She closed her eyes and whispered his name backwards. Tu. Then let it slip from her mouth into the water. The current took it, and the wind shifted. The moment the name disappeared, the world did too. The breath left the trees, the light drained from the sky. The house behind her groaned once, then collapsed inward like it had been hollow all along. A single final wail rose from beneath the ground, high, piercing, and utterly alone. Mai fell to her knees, her body intact, but her heart blank. She tried to remember why she was crying, why her chest ached, why her hands were covered in dirt, why the name Tom made her shiver, though she no longer knew what it meant. And far beneath the soil, something once hungry curled into silence, not dead, not gone, just forgotten. The house was gone, just a blackened patch of earth where wood had once stood. No fire had spread, no wind had blown. It had simply collapsed, as if hollow from the start. The villagers avoided the spot. They whispered about it, threw salt when passing. No one rebuilt. No one asked about Mai. She lived now in a smaller hut built near the rice terraces. She worked the fields, ate in silence, slept in silence. There were no songs in her throat, no cradle in her dreams, no name on her lips. Just an emptiness she couldn't explain. Something missing, but not mourned. Because how can you mourn what you can't remember? Then came the night of the first frost. The wind turned colder, and Mai awoke to a sound she hadn't heard in weeks. Creak, creak, creak. She sat up in bed. The room was still, but the sound continued. Rhythmic, familiar. Her breath caught. It sounded like a cradle rocking. But there was no cradle here. Just the bamboo floor, just her mat, just the shadows. She rose. The sound stopped. She opened the door. The wind greeted her like an old friend, cold and sharp. And there, just beyond the edge of the garden, was a shape, low to the ground, rocking, back and forth, back and forth, wooden, broken, charred. It was the cradle, the one she had destroyed, the one buried in ash and memory, now whole again, but empty. She stepped forward, as if in a trance. Each footfall felt familiar. She didn't remember the object, but her body knew it. Her arms ached like they once held something. Her lips itched like they once whispered names. And her voice, silent for so long, suddenly hummed a melody, soft, gentle, a lullaby. The cradle rocked harder, responding, inviting, and from within, a whisper. Not a voice, a vibration, a sound that lived inside the bones. She reached toward the cradle, not knowing why, not knowing who, just needing to. Then she paused. Her hand hovered over the cradle. Inside, the wood was worn smooth, a groove like something had curled into it night after night. And embedded deep in the corner was a single tooth, milk white, still damp, still warm. She stepped back. The song stopped. The wind died. And from the shadows of the trees behind her, a voice she didn't know, but her soul recognized, whispered, "Mama." She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there as the cradle rocked itself. The first time, it was in her sleep. Mai woke in darkness, the taste already on her tongue, gritty, cold, damp. She sat up, coughing, spitting mud onto her hands. Her fingernails were black, soil packed between her teeth, her lips cracked and bleeding. There was no memory, no dream, just a lingering warmth in her mouth and a feeling like she had been fed. She cleaned herself by moonlight, scrubbing until her gums bled. But the next night, it happened again. This time, she woke kneeling in the garden, hands buried in earth up to her elbows, mouth open, soil clinging to her chin. She didn't scream. She simply sat back, dazed, and began to hum. The villagers noticed. They whispered. "She's been touched," one said. "She eats from the grave," said another. Children were told not to look at her house after dark. Animals avoided her path. Yet Mai never seemed angry, never violent, just distant, like her mind was somewhere else, someplace deeper, lower. She stopped eating food altogether. Rice, soup, fruit, they made her sick. But earth, she craved it. A specific kind, dark, wet, soft, like the kind beneath a cradle. Sometimes she'd chew slowly, thoughtfully, like tasting a memory, and sometimes she'd whisper while doing it. "He's growing. He likes it warm. He has my teeth now." One morning, the midwife returned, not to warn, not to confess, but to watch. She stood silently at the edge of the garden as Mai sat cross-legged in the dirt, humming softly, her hands scooping soil into her lap. The midwife said nothing for a long time. Then, "You should not be able to remember." Mai looked up, her face smeared with mud. Her eyes were blank, but her lips curled into a smile. "I don't," she said, "but my body does." That night, Mai woke from another sleepwalk. She found herself back in the ruined clearing where her old house once stood. At the center, a shallow pit, freshly dug. In it, clumps of hair, splinters of burnt wood, and something else. A bundle of cloth soaked through with milk, and on top, a small jawbone, still growing teeth. Mai picked it up gently, cradled it, and whispered without knowing why, "Sleep now, little one. Mama's here." Then, without thought, she placed the jawbone against her tongue and swallowed. She smiled, and behind her, the wind stirred the soil, shaping it, rocking it, welcoming it. The earth opened its arms, and something inside it sighed. At first, it was the floorboards. They no longer creaked, they exhaled. When Mai walked, she could feel the gentle give beneath her feet, like pressure under skin. The wood rose, then fell, in slow, rhythmic pulses, like the whole house had developed a heartbeat. The windows fogged over, even when it wasn't cold. Inside, the air grew damp, thick with moisture that dripped from the ceiling like sweat. The walls? They moaned, low, long, like someone on the other side pressing their face to the boards and whispering through teeth that had just grown in. Mai didn't mind. She sat at the center of it all, quiet, still, one hand on the floor, palm flat, feeling the rhythm. "He's almost ready," she said to no one. At night, the beams in the ceiling would stretch, making groaning noises like tendons tightening. The corners of the room swelled outward, as though something inside the house was pushing against it, trying to make space. And then came the cracks. Not in the wood, in the silence. Splinters of laughter echoing through the night, childlike, high-pitched, sometimes giggles, sometimes gnawing. The house was not shelter anymore. It was womb. Visitors stopped coming. The villagers said the house was cursed, that it was alive. One man swore he saw it inhale, the curtains drawing inward, though no wind blew, the walls sucking tight like lungs gasping before a scream. They told stories of passing by at night and hearing a voice inside. "Mama, more, hungry." Then came the milk, seeping from the gaps in the floor, coating the baseboards, spoiling in bowls before being poured. It was not cow's milk. It was thicker, almost human, and it came from nowhere. Except it didn't. It came from him, or from what he was becoming. One evening, Mai sat at her table when the lamp blew out, though the flame had been strong. Darkness took the room like ink. She heard the house shift around her. Then, thud, 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 like feet, small feet, running on the ceiling. She didn't look up. She simply smiled. "He's almost ready," she whispered to the house as it slowly created room for him. That night, the walls began to pulse, like a throat learning how to swallow. The front door bulged outward, and in the shadows, above the hearth, a shape pressed through the wood. Tiny hands, an open mouth, eyeless sockets, trying to push through. Mai didn't scream. She opened her arms, and the wall breathed in. They say the house disappeared overnight. No smoke, no rubble, no sign of fire. Just gone. Where it once stood, there is now only a patch of black earth, damp year-round, soft even in drought, as if something beneath is always turning. The elders refuse to walk near it. Children are told not to play there, and if a dog wanders too close, it whimpers and runs, tail tucked, ears flat. Some nights, when the fog is thick and the moon is pale, travelers say they see a shape, a woman, sitting on the ground, hair hanging loose, rocking something invisible in her arms. She hums a tune no one recognizes, but it hurts to hear, like a song made of breath and bone. Other times, there's a cradle, just appears, empty but rocking, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, even without wind, even when the air is still as death. They say if you place a bowl of warm milk outside your door on the wrong night, it'll be empty by dawn, not spilled, drained, and in its place, a single baby tooth, still wet, still warm. No one speaks her name anymore. It's been forgotten, willingly or not. Some say that was part of the ritual. Others say she gave it up herself. But the song remains, in the wind, in the soil, and in the walls of houses built too close to the edge of grief. And when a baby dies before its naming, the villagers still perform the ritual, cradling the hollow, milk, soil, hair. But now they leave out one more thing. They never sing. Because once a mother did, and something that was never meant to live listened.